Dear guests, friends from all over the world, good afternoon. I'm from UPDIS. My name is Ma Xiao. I'm your MC today. So first of all, on behalf of all the employees of UPDIS, I'd like to extend my warm welcome to the 2022 8th World Cities Summit, Shenzhen Workshop. And for those guests and all the friends watching online from all over the world, welcome again. And also a big thank you to the organizer of World Cities Summit, which is Singapore Livable City Center. Thank you for supporting this workshop today. So this event, we will start from China urban researcher and experts' perspectives. And we will talk about the challenges posed by a post-pandemic era. And we will discuss the sustainable, livable city construction in China and how can we build high-quality, livable environments. And we had the privilege to have invited 4 heavyweight speakers today. They are Chairman of Morrow Design Studio, First Chairman of the Livable City Center Singapore, Commissioner of the Urban Design Construction Bureau Singapore and Chief Urban Planner, Commissioner of the Urban Construction Development Bureau of Singapore, and Chief Architect, Mr. Liu Taige, also known as the Urban Plan Father of Singapore. Now we would like to invite Mr. Liu Taige to give us some opening remarks for the China Cities Summit workshop. Let's welcome.
Thank you for having me. So I can speak on your forum. And I know your event is part of the World Cities Summit hosted by Center for Livable Cities Singapore. I used to be the first chairman of Center for Livable Cities, so a special thank you to you for supporting us. And the theme of today is very good. It's called Placemaking a High-Quality Living Environment in the Post-Pandemic Era. So, I will speak a little bit about my thinking on this topic. First of all, as urban planners, we need to make sure what we do is of high quality. And I think for a city to build quality places, we definitely need to do it for people and for land. People is for livability and community resilience, and land is for the protection of the functions and ecology. If that's the case, it's going to help the economic development of the city, and people will love the state or government if it's done the correct way. And I know the keyword here is also important. The kind of placemaking in high quality, because currently we haven't seen many places with high quality placemakings. That's why I hope through today's webinar we need to know that the work of urban planners need to have deeper thinking. In general, we urban planners should think ourselves as servants, so we can better understand the habitual requirements of the living of people, and also requirements on the functions and protection of the environment. So make sure our urban plan is sustainable and of high quality. We must know that we should not be obsessed with the sexy slogans that does not stand the test of the practical world. It's not going to be a good thing for cities. So basically, to build good quality plan, we need to focus on both macro and micro scopes. And to make sure it's precision, we need to think as humanitarians. We need to design for the people and for the land. But we also need to be work like scientists, because everything has to be planned very precisely. And also, we know the city is like an art piece. We must have the eyes of artists, like we are dating with the land. And speaking of the relationship between city and COVID, we know the city is there because we need it. And we know cities have experienced wars and pandemics, but they always stand in time. And we are now dealing with the COVID-19. We believe we need to disrupt or revolutionize the structure of the city. However, I think we need to be cautious. Based on our experiences, we can make some micro adjustments for COVID-19. But actually, I think COVID-19 impact on the city is not as big as the technology. And it's not going to disrupt the nature of the cities. We just might need to make some minor adjustment. That's why we need to just to focus on the basic functions and the efficiency of the cities. Okay, finally, I wish a great success of the webinar. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Liu Taige, for his kind remarks for the seminar. Please allow me to introduce today's hosting institution, which is UPDIS. Let's talk about the background, the information of UPDIS. I'll just speak for 90 seconds. UPDIS was incorporated in 1990. It's been growing together with the city of Shenzhen in the process of urbanization for the past 30 years. Now we have profound capabilities in urban planning, design, and studies. We have been widely involved in the policymaking in Shenzhen, urban development research, and in the process of the consulting projects, we have created a lot of capabilities, expertise in projects. Now, UPDIS has become one of the most important technology teams in China for urban design. Taking this opportunity, UPDIS want to share with the world about our thinkings on the placemaking in post-pandemic era, using our expertise to really design for the city in the new era for better governance and for better lifestyle in cities. Okay. Now I'm going to invite keynote speakers. First and foremost, Professor Wu Zhiqiang. His topic today is post-pandemic and the city resilience. Let's welcome Professor Wu.
衷心感谢司马院长的这个邀请，非常高兴有这么一个机会，大家一块来谈后疫情时代高品质的人居环境的深度营造。拿到这个题目呢，我是第一个就开始打了个问号，后疫情，啥叫后疫情呢？什么时候是疫情？
What do we define as pre-pandemic or post-pandemic? So I started to question about the timeline of the pandemic, either for placemaking or high-quality living environment. I think they're all related to the resilience of the urban space. That's why I'd like to talk about the resilience of urban space with post-pandemic era with a question mark. Next page, please. So, as a starter, I'd like to state that over the 8,000 years of urban history, human beings have never ceased our struggle against nature and never take it for granted that in the post-pandemic era, we're free of the urban challenges from the nature. Throughout the history of mankind in the last 8,000 years, human beings have constantly been challenged by internal, external, ecological, various types of challenges. So, as of the data that I have, in ancient Egypt, there was once a population of 40,000. That was a first mega city
还有可能
recorded
后面
in
才产
all
生这么大的一些巨大的宏大的这个
thousand
城市。
people. We came into being these mega cities and architectures and man-made buildings. The second is 45,000. That is the civilization of the two rivers. So, after 47,000, we human beings have been challenged. First time where our civilizations started to disperse elsewhere because of the shortage of water. So the third recorded history is a urban space encompassing 400,000 population in Han Dynasty in China, where the managing model of urban city has been formulated. And after that, we see the human civilization and urban city in ancient Roman Empire with a population of 1 million, creating unprecedented civilizations. That great empire, unable to sustain such a large population of dozens of millions, they split into Eastern Roman Empire and Western Roman Empire, and China started to emerge in the world stage as the gathering of major urban cities, where in Tang Dynasty you see the unprecedented largest scale urban space in Tang Dynasty, 4 million people, where in China they divided and grid the whole city into different communities. In such independent management of all these grid-like communities and the conjunction was the peak of ancient Chinese history, and this has really had deep and profound impact on our modern urban space management today. In addition to the place you work, the place you live, in China, you often come across a name called a street committee. So why a street committee is available in China? We have to date back to history in Tang Dynasty, where we manage people according to their residence. So such a grid-like management has enabled ancient Tang people to create greatest civilization ever. And then we saw in ancient India, they have created mega cities of more than 4 million people. And later, we also saw the early days of urban planning in London, a city of 700,000 emerged and evolved to a city of 6 million people, another new recorded history. By then, that 6 or 7 million population have seen floods, fire accidents, and cholera. All these uncertainties have impacted people in London, and from there we developed modern urban planning theory. So 7 million people in London to today, where in Chinese cities, a group of cities including Shenzhen, these cities are now places of almost 25 million population. And from this evolution, you saw clearly that human beings have always been shaping the urban life that they have built themselves. As in the beginning, we put it forward that cities were created of the dreams of all mankind. So cities came into being because of our aspirations and our visions. If human beings do not aspire to create civilization with barbarian thoughts, we will not be able to build great cities. So only civilization will lead to the establishment of greatest cities. So civilizations always come into hand in hand with urban space. So civilizations and cities. We need to infuse cities with civilization. If you look at Chinese history, you look at 文明 in Chinese or civilization in English. So it starts with 文, which means literature in China. So in Western context and narration, urban space and cities give birth to civilizations and a whole set of management of cities. So civilizations can be translated into 文明 in Chinese, but we have to bear in mind that only with literature, human being will never be civilized. Only with civilization and cities infused with one another, we will be able to have true cities. So throughout human history, in the last 8,000 years, you see these greatest challenges to cities. To cities in Germany, which we assumed to be quite safe, have also endured greatest catastrophe. So civilizations are very, very vulnerable. In post-pandemic era, I put a question mark here because once we're free of pandemic, we will come across greater challenges, and human beings evolve with the strikes of these catastrophes as we build greater vision and greater civilization. A few years ago, together with several PhD candidates, we tried to study on the typology of great cities. For example, the concern for safety. I have sorted out 4 typologies of great catastrophes to urban cities. The 4 largest kind of typologies. Throughout human history, we have been struggling with these catastrophes, either for natural disasters in the first column, or in second column, accidents and major disasters in modern urban space, especially in mega cities with high population density. We see major accidents and disasters. We also saw public health events here and there. When we see the vulnerability of urban space, however, only by building greater civilization will human beings are entitled to live in greater cities. So, with that 4 typologies, let's see the response from cities. First, fragile city. Fragile cities had been stricken seriously by these natural disasters. For example, when a major disaster strikes, a city responds and learn from the disaster. And that's what I call by a resilient city. So the intention for today's webinar is to get away from fragile city and build resilient city. Third typology, with resilience is not enough. We need to build learning city which learns from history. But history can be forgotten easily, especially when we have strikes of war and disasters. We need to build learning cities that does not only survive, but also transform the response into a whole systematic management. And here comes the 4th typology of city, that is intelligent city. Cities that not only own mega data sets, but also learn and constantly learn. If you look at the city of Amsterdam, they have constantly improved and mitigate against the flooding and river issue there. And if you look at this case of Amsterdam, you will gradually find the essence of modern cities. Modern cities not only mitigate disasters, but also get much empowered with the response of these disasters. So to build an intelligent city is to choose improvement rather than neglection of history. So we need to build a city that perceives itself, a city that judges itself, a city that learns, that with intelligence. This is the cities that we have studied in 2020, every node, every population, every city. We traced on these hints and we found out the correlation between residents and the pandemic, especially at 8 o'clock in the afternoon and 6 o'clock in the morning. The spatial correlation between the residence of human being and the outbreak of the COVID-19 cases. So the key is not only to lock down particular regions, but to lock down particular hotspots. So you have to lock down and solve the arising cases in the new communities rather than the traditional public space. So when we responded to COVID-19, we need to have more precise simulation, study, and research so that we can provide very targeted pandemic response so that we will honor our greatest civilizations in which ancient Chinese people have once peaked human history. So next page.
大家可以看一下我们
For instance, in Shenzhen, we always talk about quality, and we always talk about data. We have data from every hour, everybody, the mood changes, and every kilometers. So in the blocks of Shenzhen, you can see the happiness index on the weekly basis. These can be used to help us to solve problems. So in post-pandemic era, it's very hard to tell the difference. One is pandemic, one is post-pandemic, and you can see other diseases that's emerging as we speak. Recently in Europe, especially in southern cities of Spain, they had chicken pox. And as we know, by 1985, we haven't invented any new antibiotics. So, your population living in city has doubled and doubled again. And the growing population in cities means that we need to refine our management instead of having solutions that is one size fit all. We have to be more precise. We need to learn from our ancients. That means it's not managing 1 million of them in one unit, and they have to be sub-categorized, and we have to manage them in smaller spaces. And that is how we improve the happiness of the cities around the world, and the happiness of everyone will be abstracted. And it's how we respect the people. It is the experience of everyone, and they need to be satisfied at every moment. That is what we need to do. So I'm trying to respond to the questions posted by Mr. Sima, the placemaking a high-quality living environment in post-pandemic era. I think we need to be more precise. It should be customized, individualized, and to make sure we can satisfy the needs and wants of everyone. And the statistical data need to be improved to highly experiential data for everyone. That is quality making. And high frequency of data is used to satisfy the internal needs of people. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Wu. So Professor Wu has responded to the post-pandemic era challenges at a very high level. He talked about the ecological disasters in the city, public security, and the eventual securities of the city. And he explained all the challenges, and he also talked about the 4 types of the cities in their ways in dealing with the challenges. There are successes and there are failures. And based on different scales along the history in urban management and control, there are many ways to manage them. If you do it the right way, you can always grow the city and make it stronger. And Mr. Wu talked about the Chinese wisdom in city governance. So that is a huge support of the culture in China. We had 5,000 years of culture. That is really the wisdom where we can exploit. But if you don't do things right, city will disappear. That is why we need to improve the resilience of the city in dealing with the uncertainties. The urban city resilience is a way to make sure that we can help the city more robust. And now we know much better about the urban space resilience. And it's also given us a lot of thoughts and inspirations for future city planning. Thank you, Professor Wu. Thank you, Mr. Sima. No, I'm not always a fan of the Chinese culture. We need to know that there are good things and there are bad things in our culture. And today I haven't touched upon the bad things. So the tiered city management, refined city management, is the more senior level of civilization. Thank you, Mr. Wu. That's really insightful. Now I'm gonna invite Mr. Wang Weiren, and his topic is urban village policies, dense ecological city, and natural landscaping architecture. Let's welcome Professor Wang. Thank you. Let me share my screen. I want to thank UPDIS for having me, and I'm happy to be here together with Professor Wu and Sun. Professor Wu talked about the historical perspective. It's really on a very high level, talking about the livable city's future. So I'm going to talk from a microscopic level as an architect. How we build architecture, making it more natural, ecological. So when buildings are built in cities, in the dense cities, what we can do as architects to make sure our space is more resilient, robust. It's really about the relationship between building and city. As an architect, and we always like to talk about the urban courtyardism, from low density to high density, from buildings to relationship between building and the city. In recent years, I've been doing some research together with my students in Hong Kong University. I'm trying to do something called adaptive tower. It is a high-dense living environment. How can we build those towers with a mind on ecology? So very briefly, I will talk about what I have done as an architect, from smaller scale to bigger scale, from village to suburbs and to urban areas. And I also will touch upon my vision on what we can do into the future. So from traditional building or architecture of China, it's more like a relationship between room and modular, or body with nature, and then the clusters of buildings, and then to high density urban area. This is the Chinese wisdom. As you can see from the picture, inside the architecture, we are making nature part of the architecture. So the environment becomes the landscape of the architecture with this skylight. You use that to solve problems of ventilation and natural lighting. And you bring that into the building, reflected in the sections and reflecting the nature inside the building. Recently, I have designed a small Hutong guest house in Beijing. So this is really a room scale kind of project, and using precision solution to connect the city with the courtyard, and then from the courtyard to the surrounding area. So this is just a 3-meter wide room, and we are looking at the relationship with the outdoor environment. This is the living room, and this is a very small courtyard. And how can we embed natural features, including drainage and plantation? In this exercise, and we are expanding our exploration, talking about the relationship of the buildings. So this is a village project in Songyang village, or Pingtian. This is a abandoned courtyard. We're converting them. And expanding from this project, you can see there are empty spaces, farmland, cattle sheds, and we are converting the deserted room into a tea house. From one point, we're expanding to those yellow spaces, or maybe sometimes into next building, and then extending all the way up to the mountain. This is the cluster of the buildings. It's just like from the human body to the wider relationship with the nature and with other buildings, making it as a bigger landscaping of feng shui, as we say it in China. And I've learned many things from this project, and recently I have another project in a village of Henan. It's in the valley. This is an abandoned village. There are 5 courtyards in the middle, deserted, and we are converting them in this project. We're looking at the fabric, and we're trying to expand this spine from north to the south, eventually making it a 30 guest room B&B kind of motel, and as a tourist destination. In the middle, this is an L shape, 5 courtyards here. And from one room, we are replicating it, making it a living hall. And to north and south, we are creating more courtyards, but it's higher density with more efficiency. And the courtyard is sometimes facing the river and sometimes facing the mountain. And we've been researching the typology, making sure the scale of the building is responding to the river and the mountain. And then the connection of the buildings are vertical from using the alleys. And there are old alleys and new alleys we have built. And you can see the mountain in the back. On the right-hand side, it's the old building, and on the left, it's the new building. In addition to the compact earth, we have also used the local stone as landscape elements. And on the left, it's the guest hall connected all the way to the back. Those are the ancient trees and houses in the background. And we added the new stones on top of the old ones. And we are keeping all these trees. And then all the way extending to north and south, all the plantation have been reserved. And that's the front row facing the river, and the back row of the house are facing the mountain. And the cottage, we are giving rise to the structure, making sure it's a 2-store building. And the new building are using steel structure and compact earth. It's a hybrid kind of typology in the building. In the architecture, we are still using the alleys, making sure they have vision on the nature. That's the tree, that's the river, and it's a courtyard, but it's also very much talking about nature. This is about the traditional building, and we are trying to building more close relationship with the nature in the surrounding area. And also recently, actually, we started this 10 years ago, and we are now working on the phase 2 project of our COHK Shenzhen campus. The buildings, and between the buildings, the functions are discrete, but we are creating a system of campus. So I will skip all the details, but very importantly, we wanted to reserve the mountain, and we want every corner in the campus can have a vision on the mountain. This monolithic structure is more close to the mall, but in the middle we have some porous where the wind, water can flow from the mountain into the campus. And that's the library and student center I've designed. In the middle, we have the water from the mountain, making sure it's also a hybrid type of structure. It's semi-underground, and we are using that to adapt to the elevation difference. And they are connected, and the bridges are connecting 2 buildings. So this is a hybrid building, and it's really about relationship in between. To the left, we have designed these 4 buildings and using the underground and the above ground footbridges to connect it. And now also it's connected to the teaching block on the right-hand side. It's now a complex. Looking from the mountain, you can see the comparison between the campus and the high-rise buildings in the city area. This is designed with nature in mind. That is the library again. We've used some special material, and all the spaces in the library, as you can see, you can always see the windows. You can always enjoy some daylight. And in the student center, we have a number of the sections relationship where you can see the background of the buildings.
so that we have formulated a series of elevated complex where we enable the users of the space to see beyond the grassland and mountains. Even at second story, third story, the buildings are well connected. The student center, together with the dormitories, also formulate extended architectures. With such thoughts, we have completed the first phase, and now we are creating the second phase, where in addition to filling up the space left over in first phase, we also would love to create resonance between buildings. In addition, we want to take advantage of the reservoir and the lake, where we can create open waterscape. So internally, the ecological environment of the campus can be well connected with outside campus landscape, mountains, and lake. Recently, I've just completed the design for a new campus in Shenzhen, where the plot ratio has been tripled or doubled in the building of the Shixia Primary School. In this project, we'd like to transform the 6-story buildings into a building designed and adapted for kids, where we would love to adapt this primary school into a city activity center. In addition to elevating these trees to the open space at the second story, we have created space on the first story where a multifunctional stadium can be created and extended to outdoor grassland. So in terms of the sections, what I'm trying to emphasize here is over the rapid development of Chinese urbanization, one striking feature in China is we have created greater and larger buildings. Such a primary school taking up or 20,000 of square meters is not rare. We see these mega structures becoming a fabric of the city. So how do we transform these mega cities into a multifunctional urban space? In 1980s, in the States and Europe, when we plan for roads, plaza, and open space, we place buildings to create resonance, where today in China we have these mega architectures covering 100,000 of square meters. We not only need these mega structures, we also need to formulate urban structure with these mega buildings. And we also need to deal with the relationship in terms of sections, not only the landscaping, but also transforming these open space, grassland, trees, vegetation into a well-connected ecology. For example, a particular tree, will we penetrate into the rock, into underground, where we can create all these elements in the ecology together, where worms, birds can formulate micro-ecology system. That's my ambition now, that in the high-density complex in Shenzhen, bit by bit, I can create this micro-grid for ecology. This is PolyU that I have designed a few years ago. Such a 20-story campus was transformed into separate buildings where we can walk from one building to the other through staircase. Of course, I have come across a lot of barriers, but I've never given up my ambition. So in recent years, I have studied with my students on such a thing that I call adaptive towers. So adaptive towers came into being because of rising sea level, of changing climate, to add more resilience to our towers. The mega towers are most vulnerable and least resilient. So how do we create more resilience and more ecology for these towers? In Hong Kong, such a high-density city, you know that over 30% of the urban space was taken up by architecture, and we have 50% of the open space covered by reserved parks. Hong Kong has successfully reserved a large number of plots, but also these high-density towers are a very particular feature of the skyline. If you look at the public residence in Hong Kong, mostly we built towers. In one tower, we have 8 households in one story, and in 40 stories, we have over 10,000 or 100,000 populations there. So 10 towers connected have enabled Hong Kong to build highly efficient living environments. In one particular tower, we have a population of 1,000 people, and with few towers connected along one street, we have 10,000, which is the size of a town in the Western Europe. Of course, the iteration and other issues have been well resolved by Hong Kong. But now in Hong Kong, we try to create very highly dense buildings, where in Hong Kong, we need to release particular efficiency and building a more ecological tower in the future.
So in this monolithic architecture, we call it architectural urbanism. It's a system of the city. It's different than the traditional architecture or buildings as individual ones. It is also not the perspective of the urban plan. And we need to make sure our building is more ecological in the future. We want to invent more typologies and to make adaptive urban architecture in dealing with the urban challenges. So the post-pandemic question, I think, like Professor Wu said, the history of human beings is about city. It's really about the health. And the revelation is also about the health of the people. We are always dealing with the diseases and infections. And we want to take advantage of COVID-19 because it's changing our lifestyle. For instance, I'm not in Shenzhen now, but I can still talk to you. And we can spend more time at home or in other places if we like to be. And more importantly, we need to minimize our devastation on nature. And we have desires. We need to develop the economy, and in between, we still need to respect the nature and the ecology, making sure the building is part of the urban environment. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wang. Thank you for your fantastic sharing. So, the economy, technology, capital are all elements that's concentrating in high-dense cities. And he's been talking about his understanding of the sustainable and ecological development. It's very important to the urban development into the future. And in post-pandemic era, with high-dense cities, we still need to make high-quality living environment, where we need ecological urbanism approaches, like Professor Wang shared with us, the ecological urbanism concept, and also the groundscape, new typologies of architecture, for instance. That's something we want to explore, and that can be combined with other approaches. And in the meantime, we can also peek into the traditional nature of China, the unity of heaven and people. And I believe, again, the culture of China has been out and about for 5,000 years already. And we have 1.4 billion population on the land. And the ecology and construction need to be built together. And I think we can draw some experiences from traditional Chinese culture. Professor Wang has been exploring into the traditional architecture, making sure they can also be adapted in modernity, making sure it can adapt themselves for modern life. And he has many exercises in his work. It's really inspiring. Thank you, Professor Wang. Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite UPDIS Vice President Mr. Shan Liang to give us his speech. And his topic today is home is where a peace of mind is. Placemaking in Shenzhen in the post-pandemic era. Let's take it. The guests, good afternoon. We have just heard from Professor Wu and Professor Wang. It's really inspiring, and it's my great pleasure. Taking this opportunity, I'd like to also share with you some of my personal experiences and also exercises we are doing at UPDIS. So as we can feel together, time flies. I remember I met with Professor Liu Taige in 2018 in Singapore on the last World Cities Summit, and that's more than 3 years ago. I looked into my cell phone, into those pictures. That reminds me of what happened at the beginning of the pandemic. On the second day of the new year, people start to panic. The supermarket in my place has been swarmed by people, and you have to wear masks. By the end of January, and Shennan Boulevard is empty, and we were rooting for Wuhan. That is the Sanlian Life Weekly. There are theme reports. We know that we had a pandemic. We know it's going to end. However, this COVID-19 is really making us different. All the cities will be different. And we are thinking in the post-pandemic era, how are we going to build a livable environment for cities? Shouldn't the Chinese thinker say that man is not as strong as cattle, but they are used by us because we are gregarious. That is why human beings are the leader of the spiritual lives on the earth. City is a place of congregation that brings dynamics and efficiency, but there are challenges. And concentration of people will cause the spread of the pandemics. Historically, pandemics grows together with the city. There are many ones: Black Death, cholera, flus, and those pandemics have left the DNA segments in our body. According to researchers, 80% of our human genes are coming from virus. So it's evolving. And the living environment of the people is also evolving together with the war on pandemics. The Black Death in the 14th century has given us inspirations where we need to have ventilation, it should be dry, and we also should have clean water. And the cholera outbreaks in 19th century has also given rise to urbanization, and that is where we see the first public health law, talking about the width of the streets, sanitation facilities. So that has become the foundation of the modern urban plan theory, especially for the London cholera in 1849, caused 14,000 deaths. Dr. Snow, has tagged all the address of the death cases on the map, so the map can talk. Eventually, they find out the source, which is a well. That's really a big data kind of practice. And the water has been polluted, and then that gave rise to the great underground engineering project in London. They have created a brand new sewage system. So London has become the first modern city in the world, like Professor Liu said earlier. We, as urban planners, need to have the mind of the humanitarian scholars, brain of the scientist, and eye of the artist. We also need to have something that's similar to Dr. Snow. We need to have techniques. We can look at the world through the pandemic goggles to understand the challenges and find the solutions for it. The technology is improving drastically. We now have technology like CT scan. We have big data, AI for city. But I think pandemic, COVID-19 is like a city scan for the city. Now we can see what is the problems we have in our living environment. And COVID-19 is also like a CT scan for our mind to understand the needs of people living in the city. So in Shenzhen, we had lockdown, but in Spring Festival of China, we have a lot of people in the parks. People are camping, and then in this spring, people are going back to the nature. Once the lockdown has been loosened up, people are going into the waters and the mountain, and they are trying to live in the open public spaces. For instance, the Shamyep Upper City Complex, the platform is really noisy, but you can see the interior shopping mall is quiet. You see that in COVID-19 pandemic, people still want to have intimate relationship with the nature. We need public experiences inside the city. We need, like vitamins, we also need green vitamin every day. According to some researchers, that short period of nature experience will be as good as hiking. 30 minutes of intimacy with nature will be good for your hypertension. That is why we want to have livable city. It's not only good for the health, but also good for the heart. WHO has good definition of health city. It should have healthy environment, good life quality, and also good psychological and sanitary conditions. So some say 21st century is the era of cities. So cities is not only a place for human settlement, but also a carrier where we are dealing with the relationship with nature and with people. So spatial relationship, temporal relationship are also important. On the National Working Committee, they say that urban design means we need to create livable environment for people. We are creating beautiful families for people where we can live with the nature. Mr. Wu Liangyong said, we need to think from the perspective of human environmentalism. President Xi also talked about the common community of lives. It's always about the traditional Chinese wisdom of heaven and the human unity. So COVID-19 is not only for people, but also for the environment. So the urban life organism is also sick, and we have to deal with the approaches and methodologies in dealing with the nature. But we don't need to overthrow all the traditions. We need just to evolve and upgrade into a new equilibrium. So city is not only the root of the problem, but also a solution to the problem. Harmony between people and nature can be used to cure the city. And in the city, we have a better understanding of the uncertainties in the face of COVID-19. We know that the COVID is still there. Monkeypox is on the rise. And we are always in the era of pre-pandemic, in-pandemic or post-pandemic. So urban plan is like the traditional Chinese doctors. They need to foresee the risk and cure it before it happens.
Let's go back to the practice in Shenzhen. It is a high-density city. It was built within the shortest time possible on the smallest space possible with the fastest speed and best quality. Such a high encompass of time and space have also brought challenges to Shenzhen. This is a city of high density, high development intensity, and of heights. In the UPDIS Habitat Center 2021 Shenzhen evaluation, we saw that the development intensity in Shenzhen is close to extreme, where our resources are almost hitting on the bottom line. Of the 13,000 surveys, we found out that people in Shenzhen have concerns for the high development intensity, the population density, and high architectures. Therefore, for Shenzhen to become a demonstration city, we must also incorporate our own management system on bottom lines of high density, high development intensity, and heights. We need to build Shenzhen into a demonstration city, an exemplary city. In the last 40 decades, the urban plan and design have always delicately dealt the relationship between city and habitat, the relationship between people and time. We have made a lot of useful explorations. For example, in the latest round of the master plan for Shenzhen urban plan, we have transformed from the past blueprint design to an upgrade of the system. We built a vision as Glocal Shenzhen, a local Shenzhen facing the future. We want to build the Super Bay Area metropolitan, the public vitality city, a vertical city to formulate more open, more diverse, and more vital city, which is global. In our design, by 6,000 questionnaires and very diverse big data, we also have drawn precise portraits for city needs. For example, the water close experience, public life, high density, and the sense of belonging. We focus on building a particular feature of a Shenzhen filled with mountain and sea, a city taking advantage of the public space, building high compact quality and vitality. First, we need to deal with the relationship between people and nature. We have to integratedly design the mountain, water, forest, land, lake, grass, sea, and city. With dispersion and density, we need to create a particular grid structure of a Super Bay Area immersed among mountains and river. We wanted to create a common homeland for 18 million Shenzhen population and over 30,000 wildlife and animals. We also need to deal with the population relationship, for example, by activating and connecting with the public space. We need to build a higher quality and more diverse and public space with more vitality. Of course, in Shenzhen, you see density everywhere, but we also can build compact city. We need to upgrade on the spatial relationship in the city to aspire to quality and efficiency. In order to do so, we need to find people-friendly density. We have created a three-dimensional, very precise plan for the city where we will shape high functional and very pedestrian-friendly typology. In the same time, we need to look into the past, present, and future of the time. In chronological system, we need to build a 7,000 plus 40 attitude where we need to learn from the past 7,000 years of history, not only preserving the particular features of Shenzhen's past, but also create new environment in Shenzhen so that each and everyone in Shenzhen can find their lost identity. President Xi once said that a sound ecological environment is the fairest public products and the most inclusive well-being. So in Shenzhen, we boast organic typologies of mountain and sea. However, people here do not find going out to the mountains or sea very friendly. So with this sea and mountain plan, we wanted to create micro connections where we can upgrade the mega system of the nature and city so that we can upgrade our relationship with nature. With more diverse public leisure, we can upgrade relationship among people so that we can explore a Shenzhen paradigm for ecological upgrade. We wanted to build a world-class ecological leisure network with one roof, one belt, and 20 corridors, with such a framework to build very water-friendly space. With these connections, we can organically connect the isolated ecological typologies, improve the mountain and sea. We have built a 4-tier ecological network consisting the mountain, the sea, the corridor, and the natural lanes. By connecting with life, we utilize big data analytics. We connect the workplace and residents with green corridor and green streets. We also have improved the service coverage rate of the parks so that everyone in Shenzhen can enjoy outdoor by their doorstep. We also have created connected green lane from the north to the south of the city. We provided such an opportunities where in the green lane, people can get access to water, to mountain, and the city. For example, in Xiangmihu Lake, regional design. We have carried out such thoughts with the mountain and sea corridor. We have rebuilt a nature in the suburb of the city, a city parlor with mountain and sea. Also here, we have allocated low-density shopping streets to extend the past fond memory of the food in Xiangmihu Lake. Now I'd like to talk about our practice in Qianhai in 29 development units design. In such a high-density complex, we have created pocket parks where such a mini space can well balance the high density of this complex. In the Mix Qianhai Comprehensive Project, we have combined the mountain and sea corridor. We have designed a breeze valley, which with a length of 800 meters and extending to 2 community streets. After opening, the Mix Qianhai become very viral. In comparison to traditional semi-closed indoor complex, such a open space where you can enjoy not only shopping experience, but also the breeze of the sea and sunshine is extremely popular. As a previous speaker mentioned, we need to create and plan urban space that really finds harmony between its urban value and commercial value. In the recently convened Shenzhen Municipal Urban Planning Committee meeting, we have put forward 6 traditional campaigns. With these campaigns, we will try to dive into the roof space in Shenzhen to expand more outdoor activity space, public space, to increase more green coverage by reducing the carbon emission of the city. I think these are all great measures for Shenzhen to explore building a mega-scale low-carbon and green city. Before I conclude, as of today, there is a new round of outbreak of pandemic in Hainan, but now we are very calm in face of the pandemic. For example, in such a webinar, we don't see each other face to face. However, with such a hybrid mode, we still enable face-to-face communication. In China, we invented 10-in-1 tube acid test technology, where in 3 days we can test 18 million population. We also have the nucleic acid test stood like the newspaper booth. In the future, for Shenzhen's urban planning and design, we not only need to be micro, but also micro. So in post-pandemic, building a homeland, we need not only touch upon on the micro aspect, but on the macro aspect. In 2020, I also applied for my first personal patent for the discomfort with the mask belt. Such a personal patent has realized and helped me to figure out that many things in the past, because of the outbreak of pandemic, will not be solved overnight. But we can always start from every bit of today. Thank you. Thank you to Vice President Shan for your speech on the building of high-quality environment in Shenzhen. A healthy, livable, happy urban life is the common aspiration of all mankind. An ideal urban living environment should not only help people to live, but also become a homeland for their soul. It is an ideal place for our material life and spiritual life. I hope, given the backdrop of developing Shenzhen's high-quality living environment, UPDIS can contribute our experience and practice. I hope that can be very inspiring for all of you. Thank you to Vice President Shen for that speech. Now, please join me in welcoming Professor Sun Yiming, who would like to speak on building livable environment and sustainable improvement for livable environment in GBA Bay Area. Please. I wonder if you see my shared screen yet. Not? Yes.
开始吧。I'm sorry, I have to change my schedule. So I've just heard from the previous speakers, and now I want to say a big thank you to the organizer for having me. And the placemaking in post-pandemic, as we have heard many discussions in recent years, and people are looking at this event and the phenomenon from different perspectives and at different scale, large and small. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes it's intangible, and it gives us opportunity so we can revisit what we have done on different levels. But we shouldn't be that pessimistic, because the COVID is not going to disrupt our way of living as human beings. Yes, of course, it poses many challenges, but there are new methods to dealing with the old problems. But of course, so the construction method and behavior of people feels like we are not in shortage in land resource. However, we are. And now China has made commitment on carbon neutrality and carbon peak, and there are new policies. So going into the future, we can see the direction already very clearly, but we still need to make it work. There are many things to consider, and we know that we are developing very quickly, but there are huge imbalance, especially in Great Bay Area. This is the Pazhou picture a few years back in Guangzhou. You can see the fishermen, and on the other side you can see the high-dense urbanization is also happening. The urban space is not continuous, and there are fragments that's been constructed along the years, and we have to solve all those ecological problems, old problems and new problems. In Greater Bay Area, very importantly, we know that economy and cultural developments are already rather nice in China, especially in COVID. You can see from the numbers, the Greater Bay Area is developing rather healthily. So the traditional problems have persisted, and in the past 7 to 8 years, we can know that the land resource problem is imminent now. We have to change our mindset, but we need to think about the inefficiency of the land use at the same time. Then from the design strategy, institutional innovation, there are many new approaches. So I will review with you what we've done in Guangzhou, some case studies. And on the micro level, we can see huge urban land waste. In the CBD area, the density is much lower than the global cities. And in terms of the road area, we have the lack of density. So these are problems have been now realized by practitioners. But in terms of implementation, it's not catching up. So from this resource utilization perspective, we need to be wary and diligent. So it's easier said than done, but we just want to live with it. And the smart building or planning is the concept we are using. From planning to architecture to construction, they should be consolidated and considered in harmony. And looking back into the history, we can see many good examples of urbanization. The smart planning and building is really based on traditional culture and wisdom, and expand from it. And we have a very good general environment, and then intensification should also be important and to meet the technical rationality. And then it should be based on flexibility and adaptability and adhere to control rationality. Long-term adaptivity is important. There are many hundreds of years of old buildings. They're still adaptive. Many human-built places that's being loved by people. So adaptability, flexibility is important. And in between, rationality is also important. there are general principles on urban design. We need to stick to it, including public interest priority principle. And again, it's also easier said than done, and we tend to forget those public interests, giving ways to private interest. Then engineering technology is also the important way of working. But in major decision makings, sometimes there is a lack of adherence to engineering technology. And then for flexible index, and people are trying to advocate for it, but we haven't found out a system for flexible index system. In Guangzhou, we have proposed this concept, and we are also using this principle in Shenzhen and Greater Bay Area. And we can see institutional innovations, but we still need to reflect which ones can be converted into regulation. Some are converted into guidelines. Some should happen on high-level discussion to better understand the reason behind it. So as the chief architect of the Guangzhou, we have the system, we have the framework to analyze everything, but in connecting urban design and implementation, nothing is perfect. In Guangzhou, you can see there are different mechanisms in different districts. I know that in Shenzhen, there are chief architect system in the super headquarter area, but it's not different in the other area of the city. So to convert those principles into regulation is going to be very difficult. Guangzhou is the northmost center of the Greater Bay Area. The building of Guangzhou reflected the historical course, and we want to be cautious with the water, stay back from the water to build the city. So the ancient city has their understanding of security, safety of the city, and especially when we are seeing more and more natural disasters now. The old town area is actually better than the new areas in guarding against the floods. And what we have been exercising recently is along the Po River, and including Pazhou to the left is the new area, and on the west area, in the 80s, Guangzhou has been scrolling across the river. It is an industrial farm hybrid area. It's not a complete new zone. It's not a traditional sense of the urban area. So we've been challenging our urban design. This is the 2014 guideline. So there are some hard approaches. It also had some practices into the future, and we revisited the guideline in 2015, and we are trying some new things based on the working process product, and we're trying to embed into new principles for a new plan. And in the built area center of the city, we're trying to break down the high density. By the end of the 2014, the high dense road network has been breaking down, and with good timing, we also made some adaptation of the metro lines. The land usage, according to the forecast or estimation, we have saved 20% of the land. If most of the land can be concentrated like this, you can see it's going to make a huge difference, because 20% of the land in the urban area is going to be valuable, and it's going to be good for economic growth. And in the built area, we are trying to preserve the industrial relics. So sometimes it's not it's high in value directly, but we believe we need to have some reminiscence of the human history, and we want to live with those heritage. Looks like it's a new built area, high rises, high headquarters, but fundamentally we can still have the water pond coming from the 80s, and we also have the industrial relics. And the chief architect team is not only providing services. We need intervention, including a detailed urban plan. We also pushed into all the way to the construction and acceptance area. Make sure we can deliver the public space, the pedestrian corridors, underground space. And we also made some disruptions in the management, including the fire staging area, because in most of the cities in China, and the regulation is still that fire staging area should be inside the plot. And otherwise, if you stick to that principle, it's very hard to enhance the density. So in Pazhou, we are actually have the freedom. You can see these are the corridors, arcade, and setbacks of the public space, and all this public space is managed by the chief architect team. It doesn't mean that the Urban Planning Bureau can control everything, but we still tried our best to make sure we can deliver, making sure the public interest is satisfied. And together with the consideration of the rigid regulations, there are regulations adaptation, and you can see this is the fire staging area. The fire staging area is always shared with the urban public space and the streets. So make sure we can have concentration in the architecture design. And in the meantime, we can still meet the requirement for public interest. And it's designed together with the utility and landscaping features. So I think it can be, I think in Shenzhen, it's not allowed to have fire staging area shared with the streets, but I think it can happen. Once it happens, it's going to give you a very good experience along the street interface. And we are taking advantage of the chief architect policy to change the volume of the buildings, and we are changing the environmental resources, and that will skip the scales. That's why 3 years ago we got this Sustainable District Award from the European Union. And using the same principle, we are working in Nansha. Nansha has a project that's the utility infrastructure, and we still want to make sure this parcel and plan are concentrated. Nansha is the geometrical center of GBA. It's going to be a huge challenge. In terms of implementation, I think it can be optimized. And the land is not sold, but the road has to be finished, and the utility facility has to be finished. It is not a refined policy in my mind. That's why once we have optimized the urban plan, we have found out that many land can be redeveloped. However, it has been fragmented by the existing road network. And when we come up with a land plan where they can only be used as a public green space. So we have learned another experience here.
Of course, we try our best to transform these plots into people-friendly and climate-adaptive. You see that recently in the overall master plan, they have incorporated a lot of green and horizontal streets where we can create more people-friendly space. We wanted to formulate such a Lingnan-style complex structure. Of course, speaking of Lingnan style, we need to study on the local climate. Also in Nansha, when we take over the project, the whole plot and district was designed as a coastal zone. However, over the last few years, we need to have 50 meters of baseline in which we can build architectures. So we proposed a new thrifty utilization of land with creating higher elevation and more heights, so that by building these tall architectures, we solve a lot of unsolved challenges, which is a very good adaptation for the local government and real estate developer. In another zone called Bai'etan, the White Swan CBD. In the old times, across Bai'etan, we saw Shamian Island from the Opium War. We also saw the Big Swan Hotel. Here you saw the Fangcun village in Guangzhou. You saw a very multi-complicated village with various architectural typologies. In our plan, we have incorporated our past model where we stressed the importance of small streets intensity. We successfully reserved the scenic spots, the past plantations. With our optimization, even with high density development, we introduced more adaptation and resilience in terms of the public transport, in terms of the ecology and overall plan. So you saw that in this optimization project, we delivered very different planning thoughts. In 2018, 2019, mid and eastern zone of Pazhou, we also have had another research. Here in this mid and eastern region of Pazhou, it evolved on the exhibition mall. So the valid exhibition mall does not get included in the overall zone. For the exhibition zone, you saw many legacy issues. After the Opium War, Huangpu actually remained as a port communicating with foreigners. And you see that from the estuary, the Pearl River go out and get connected with the sea. So we wanted to preserve the Huangpu old port. On the other side, with our intervention, we have provided optimizations for the limitation of the exhibition, the abandoned farmland, the disruption and separation of the mega exhibition in the overall zone. So you can see such an extreme case with the Pazhou Exhibition Hall, with series of workshops rather than a design competition award. We have organized different workshops in various phases. Phase 1, we collaborate with University of California, Berkeley. On the second and third phase, we have worked with Calthorpe Associates and AI Architecture LLC, as well as Chancellor and Associates in Washington. Together, Chinese and foreign designers have exchanged with one another to comprehend such a Pazhou zone, to understand the pressing issues that urban design and planning has to solve. We also worked with government, private sector, and academia. For all these participants, we learned quite a lot from these workshops. In Guangzhou, in our field study and workshops, we have developed new understandings on the urban planning in that particular zone. With our workshop, we also identified the possibilities of the plot. We also found out the limitations for redevelopment. We also explored future blueprint where we need to create a win-win outcome for all parties. Various participants contributed something special. Some focus on the buildings and others focus on the ecology or the space. In Huangpu, we have consolidated all these design perspectives. In Huangpu, we have formulated a river belt development zone. Here we have virtual, we also have realistic intelligence sharing, where we combine the intelligence with the future blueprint to work out the redevelopment needs. Eventually, we have formulated consensus, and these consensus are very revolutionary, way beyond our imagination in the beginning. We believe that in post-pandemic era, in GBA area, we will have more and more demands from the central government on ecological rehabilitation, on sustainable development, on building livable habitat. I remembered many years ago, the central government has talked about the GBA as a major ideal destination for Chinese to explore the future typologies of cities. And I think that's a very profound mission to the GBA. When we work with the Gensler team, they talk about their understanding of a traditional Chinese city. Overall, I believe GBA will have multi-focuses, and GBA has become a warm bed for various types of innovation and perspectives. Of course, the bar is very high for all these participants in the project, especially facing the most vulnerable GBA in the world with greatest vulnerability. How do we transform the past old models of architecture? How do we transform into futuristic practice? For example, Professor Wang from Hong Kong and other speakers from the GBA had shared their thoughts with us on their endeavors. And I'm sure in GBA, we need to learn from various experts. We need to have vision, but also a firm root on the ground. This year, we have an opportunity of working with Shenzhen on the master plan. Such an opportunity has been quite rewarding for us, and it also have been transformative for us, where we try to change a lot of things that we never thought we could have changed. So that's all for my presentation. And in the last, I'd like to say thank you to the organizer for having me here. Thank you to Professor Sun for that very inspiring presentation. GBA is a world-class Bay Area. It represents China's active participation in global cooperation and competition. In the GBA, we demand for world-class habitat so that in the GBA, we can be attractive to the world talents, to be globally competitive and innovative. Professor Sun, your speech have touched upon on the building of a sustainable habitat in GBA. You talk about the goals, the principles, the practice, and in particularly, you mentioned in your presentation the master plan you have engaged in Guangzhou. You also shared with us the intensive optimization you have had to the master plan in Guangzhou. Such a model have been replicated elsewhere in China for such a world-class urban cluster, building high-quality living environment, building sustainable habitat. Your study is of great importance. Thank you to Professor Sun for that very inspiring speech. Thank you. COVID-19 have savored around the world. It is still impact the urban economic development and people's life across the whole world as we speak. Even so, we should realize that our aspiration for a better life, our optimism will never be disappearing. In post-epidemic era, we need to work unswervingly as our founding fathers. We need to engage in sustainable planning of the urban space with more sustainability and innovation. We need to address the new circumstances and new issues by making high-quality living environment. Our efforts will be able to create and deliver more healthy and better life, realizing 2030 UN SDGs, contributing our wisdom and our efforts. Before I finish, I'd like to say thank you to all the speakers for their very inspiring presentation. Thank you to CLC Center for Livable Cities for a kind organization. Thank you to all the audience for your attention. I hope we will deliver more of such opportunities where we can engage and communicate. I also hope that all of you will find today's webinar rewarding. This is the end of the webinar. Thank you.